Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Lauren Martin Clemens, and I am the head of marketing at Pypestream, the happiness platform. And this is our first PypeUP webinar of 2024. Today's webinar is titled Next Gen AI Strategies for Implementing Generative AI in Your Business Ecosystem. Our speaker today is Crystal Dixson. Crystal is an engagement manager at Pypestream. She has a degree in applied linguistics from Portland State University and completed a data science program at Lambda School. In her spare time, she enjoys cooking and elevating her barbecue game. Crystal, I'm really excited to hear from you today, so I'll hand it right over to you.
All right, thanks, Lauren. I wanted to discuss implementing some of the lessons that we've learned over the past year. So I'll go ahead and get right into it. So yeah, implementing Gen AI in your business ecosystem. So we've had a busy past year at Pypestream. We've implemented Gen AI in some of our solutions, and we have some learnings to share from this. So I'll go ahead and get into that. So agenda, we're going to go over just a brief overview of generative AI. I think a lot of us know what that is now, but just to briefly touch on this. And then example implementations, some examples that we've seen, challenges and considerations when using this tool, and some strategies for implementation. So just a brief overview of generative AI. So what is generative AI? This is an artificial intelligence that's designed to generate new and original data or content. Traditionally, we've used discriminative AI, or in recent experience, we've been using discriminative AI, which is designed more to classify data and make predictions. And that's still a very useful tool. But generative AI is very exciting because it's really opened up the possibilities of what we're capable of doing. It's trained on very large data sets, and it is able to generate new content. There's a lot of different applications for this, such as image generation or language generation. Today, we're going to focus more on what our experience is in implementing chat solutions. So, language generation is where we're at. But just to go over uh, briefly, discriminative AI, this is going to be a traditional classification model. This is what we still use this for today, and it's great for cases where you have a very clear business message, or you have a very clear messaging, and classification would make sense. There's still a lot of use cases where this is very helpful, and we really use discriminative AI or classification hand in hand with generative AI. But generative AI is very exciting because we're able to actually generate that new content. So, example implementations. What I want to kind of focus on today is examples between internal implementations and external implementations. So, for internal implementations, we're thinking about how to enhance your operations within an organization. And these are things that you're going to use to help your employees, help their work processes, such as a customer support assistant. This is one worst use case that we've seen, creating replies and communications, generating responses to assist in speeding up responses for customer support. Another thing that we've seen is knowledge sharing assistant, so dynamically generating responses by extracting relevant information from a large amount of data or a knowledge base, in order to more quickly find answers to questions internally. Summarization, able to the ability to provide a concise summary based on a large amount of text, and into a user-friendly format. and really speed up the ability to quickly find and communicate information. So internal implementations are very exciting. They're a little lower risk because you, of course, want these implementations to work correctly, but at the end of the day, they're being shown to your internal organization. So it's a little lower risk than what we're going to get into with external implementations. So, external implementations, examples that we've seen, complex user queries. So, these are going to be consumer facing solutions where perhaps there's a question that was not anticipated, or that in the context of NLU, your NLU model hasn't been trained on. These are going to be responses that are generated for questions that were not anticipated. And that's a really exciting use case that we've seen and put into practice. Personalized recommendations. These are generating personalized recommendations based on a user's input. For example, a product recommendation or a travel recommendation, based on whatever input that user has provided. So that's very exciting. And also, I added summarization here, providing consumers with a summary of recent interactions to make their life easier, make their the information and the interaction easier to digest, and make that information easier to disseminate. So we're going to go probably a little bit more in depth into external implementations because I think that's really exciting. And we're going to have a demo later on to show an external implementation from Pypestream. But I wanted to go into challenges and considerations when implementing Gen AI. So, general challenges with generative AI is bias. So, the model is only as good as the data that it's been trained on. So, we don't want to inadvertently perpetuate biases. This is something that we always want to look out for. Is there anything unfair or discriminatory coming out of our models? And that can be avoided with testing and putting in some of the guardrails that we're going to discuss later in this presentation. Misinterpretation. So models may not always accurately understand the questions that a customer brings or a user brings. So this can be frustrating when there's incorrect or irrelevant responses. And then incorrect information. So um, unfortunately, these models don't have the ability to discriminate between the legitimacy of what it's trained on. So we have to always watch out for correct information or incorrect information coming out of these use cases. And then additional challenges that we've faced over the past year that I wanted to go more into depth on is lack of explainability. So, a generative AI model, because it's trained on so much data and because of just the nature of this technology, they often operate as a black box for us. So it can make it difficult to explain kind of the reasoning behind specific outputs. It can make it very challenging to adjust when the undesired output, just finding those pulleys and making adjustments. So that's one challenge that we have. Exploitation is another one that we've seen recently. So generative AI models are susceptible to kind of bad actors who are putting in malicious inputs or trying to manipulate a model's output. For example, a user who is using a model for a car dealership and they're trying to get a vehicle or get the chat to agree to selling a vehicle for an unfair price. That would be one example. So that's another thing that we want to keep an eye out for. And then not actionable. So, generative AI on its own Has a great understanding for the inputs and is able to generate content, but um, we can't complete a task or take action on those outputs without some additional tools. So we'll get into that as well. So strategies for implementation. This is the fun part. So prompt engineering is something that's in our toolkit. This is kind of a go-to whenever we begin to implement a generative AI use case. Is we're able to adjust the prompting so that something coming from a chat solution is going to look a lot different than if you were to go to the ChatGPT website or any other generative AI website. So, if you are asking a question, you can prompt so that it stays within the context or the topic, stays within the main focus of what we're looking for, what our goal is to communicate to the user. Staying relevant and on topic is really important. We can see on the example on the right here is a example where the user types in who is the president, and we get that information out of the model. But if we use prompt engineering, we can actually steer that in a different direction and stay in the context of a helpful flight assistant or whatever the context we're trying to maintain. I will note that hallucinations still may occur with prompt engineering if we over optimize, if there are ambiguous prompts or inadequate training on a particular topic. We may still uh, get an undesired response when using prompt engineering. But it's a great tool to use and to fine tune to get um, a lot of what we're looking for in our responses. And then strategies for improving accuracy. So what we've found is that building validation layers to check the responses from generative AI is a really powerful tool. So, kind of our first tool would be prompt engineering, and our second tool would be to create algorithms or rule-based systems to maintain accuracy and make sure that the information that the user is getting is correct. So, an example of a validation layer is perhaps we have a recommender for vehicles. We would want to build a validation layer to make sure that any vehicles that are recommended to a user are available in inventory, and that that sort of validation layer that can be applied to a lot of different use cases. Just making sure that we're making good recommendations and not relying only on the generative AI. And also verifying accuracy by cross referencing, perhaps with a database that you've created or a reliable source. And then another great tool is in the design of how the user is going to interact with Gen AI. So we found that controlled input through a tool such as a questionnaire is a really effective strategy. We're able to identify key parameters. So if the goal is going back to a vehicle recommender, if the goal is to recommend a vehicle, we're able to identify key parameters and create a questionnaire so that we're inputting the correct information or good information for the generative AI model to make a recommendation from. And we can take the output from the model and use our validation tools to make sure that the user is receiving a well formatted useful response. We also have the ability to adapt based on responses, so we can dynamically adjust subsequent questions based on the user's input. And these guided interactions are just a really great tool for utilizing generative AI and having a lower risk situation because you're continuing to build in those layers between the user and the model's output and still provide them with some really great information. And then leveraging generated responses. So going back to making these responses actionable, we're able to utilize other tools to make sure that users are able to use this information, have a call to action or have some kind of meaningful impact. So in order to leverage generated responses, we'd want to define the business's objectives, make sure that we're incorporating that into the design, whether that, excuse me, whether that objective is to sell book tickets or create leads or sell a product. We'd want to make sure that we're incorporating that goal. And then, once the user has received output or a recommendation, we want to make sure that we're creating a clear call to action so that the user has an opportunity to act on this information that they've been given. And integrations are a great tool to leverage to make sure that we're seamlessly connecting with complementary applications to facilitate these transactions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and those are the major tools that we have in our toolkit. Just going back to kind of these strategies that we use. I'm going to go ahead and do a demo here of one of our customers. So this is uh, assistant that we've created for an airline, and we've implemented a couple of use cases here, but I want to highlight the vacation planner, which is a recommender and has a lot of the ideas or strategies that we've gone over during this discussion. So we're going to go over to the vacation planner. And we have a couple of different options here. We can enter a free response, but I really want to highlight this travel quiz because this is a great example of giving the
Crystal.
user. Oh,
Oh, I
yeah.
don't want to interrupt. Sorry. The screen is not showing your demo, so just want to make sure
Oh,
that you're
okay.
on the right screen.
All right. Sorry about that. Let me
Do
go
not
ahead
worry.
and reshare. And then I'm probably going to go ahead and back up too.
It always goes smoothly in practice, doesn't it?
All right. So let's go ahead and. Are you able to see now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
It's
great.
perfect.
Great. Yeah, thank you for stopping me.
Of course.
Okay, so just to recap what I just said, I want to highlight this vacation planner because it's a great example of building in these layers that ensure that the user is receiving, that we're putting in the right inputs, that we're creating great recommendations, and that we're giving the user correct information. So a lot of hallmarks of what we've just discussed here. So we're going to go ahead and take this travel quiz. So as I said before, we have a couple of different options here. We can put in free text or we can take this quiz. So this quiz was designed to create an optimal recommendation. What we're doing here is we're taking all of these different um, inputs and we're feeding this into the generative model and then checking the model's output for accuracy and then presenting that back to the user, which creates more of a low risk situation. So I'll go ahead and and we also have the ability to say, for instance, the user doesn't like these suggestions. We can, enter in some other sort of destination here, such as a wellness retreat. But we're going to go ahead and go with, let's say, Mountain Hideaway. And then looking at different activities, um, again, we're able to enter in our own custom activities, or the user is guided through this experience. So enter in those activities, and then we're also able to enter the date. So, we designed this to be able to get good, meaningful information out of the user. And then looking at group size, another important consideration. And then we also added in, so if we'd like to add in some additional information, so this makes it very customizable. So, say for instance, I want to visit a botanical garden, um, add that to the recommendation. And so, what it's doing now is it's inputting all of this into the generative model, and then we're going to get back a response. That response has been validated and formatted based on the requirements. So, looking at this, we get 3 recommendations here. We have Abu Dhabi, Muscat, and Istanbul. And if we look into, these are some summaries of what you can do in each of these destinations. So we can see that these are pretty in line with what we input into the quiz. Looking to see if, yep, you can see that there's botanical garden information. And you can see that there's also mountain, hiking, all these sorts of things that we put into the quiz. And we can actually take these recommendations, and we have this call to action to book a flight. And once we book a flight, we've actually extracted these cities so that the user can go right into a booking process once they've received this information. We're extracting other information, so that's another useful tool, is being able to extract and apply that to other use cases. So the goal here was to make that process really seamless and encourage the user, of course, to buy tickets. So I'll go ahead and stop there. Stop sharing my
Yeah.
screen so that I can go back to the slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just going into Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Yes, and there's definitely questions. So the first question that came up was, where should most people start? You were talking about internal versus external. Is it better to start internally and then, you know, explore it and then go a different direction, or,
Yeah,
what's the best path?
I think that it really depends on the business use case. So I think that what you want to do is really make sure that you are having a clear, defined goal in mind. At Pypestream, we have these design thinking workshops that are really great for defining those business goals, and making sure that I wouldn't caution against an external use case, but you want to definitely think about the risks involved, what kind of data or generative responses you want to be displayed to the users. Who's going to benefit? Is this something to make your internal processes run more smoothly, or do you have other goals in mind for external facing use cases for consumers?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then so you were talking about challenges when it comes to generative AI. Do those present opportunities for learning about your customers, or learning about how people are using your product and so forth?
Yeah, I definitely, and I think that a lot of our learnings, we've been able to see how users are interacting with generative AI, and you want to continue to iterate on this process, see how the users are continuing to use these use cases, and how make sure that you're looking at the generated responses, make sure that they're in line with expectations, and continue to refine the process. And maybe there's additional validation layers that need to be introduced. Maybe the guided experience needs to be modified in some way, but you definitely want to be analyzing, how those are being used.
Amazing. Yeah, which kind of speaks to having a partner like Pypestream on board with you. It's a lot to think about, and a lot to track and monitor, even if it is just a few use cases internally. So I certainly appreciate your time today, Crystal. It was really interesting and great to hear all the details and things that go into developing generative AI solutions at Pypestream. So appreciate your time. And until next month, we'll see everybody later. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Bye.